July 21st, 2014.
Back in the Season 2 TNG episode, Peak Performance, where they're literally doing a little war game before those ever-threatening Ferengi come knocking. Sorry about that. It's the Ferengi. Captain Picard states, Starfleet is not a military organization. Its purpose is exploration. There are many people who would call BS on this. Writer Ronald D. Moore, for example, in an AOL chat way back in 1997 stated, say Starfleet isn't the military all you want. It fails the duck test. Looks like, walks like, sounds like, etc. So, today, we're tackling a recurring topic in discussions of the Star Trek multiverse. Is Starfleet a military force, or is it primarily a peaceful organization focused on exploration and diplomacy and not shooting things? So grab your tricorder, or grab your phaser, and let's discuss whether an organization that has all the trappings of a military but does the sciencey stuff is in fact a military organization. This is Treknicity.
Welcome to Treknicity, a Star Trek podcast where we do the deep dive on all things Star Trek. I'm your host, Lars DeSenza, coming to you from California. Joining me are my co-hosts, Patrick Murray, who's coming to us from Ohio, and Mike Raper from North Carolina. And also joining us again for a second episode is our very special guest host, Patrick Goodman, who has a very long history as a writer for Star Trek and other works. It is super awesome to have you back. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
guys.
I did have a chance to pull the book up this time and hold it upside down on purpose.
Hey, that was great. I love it. Oh, it's wonderful.
Oh, come on. That's the spirit.
That's it.
Yay.
That's it. You know what? I mean, I think now going forward, like for season 9, we're all going to have to, we're all going to just have to start the episode holding our relative books upside down. You have started a trend, Patrick Goodman.
Have I now?
Yes, you have.
have.
And as many of you might know, who actually know the half a dozen people who watch this show, this
half a dozen?
is our unbelievable season 8 finale. This is episode 20. We kind of made I drew a line in the sand because there are some things I want to do to expand on what we do with this podcast. I want to refresh some of the graphics. Coming into season 8, there was a little bit of a rush to get some stuff together. And of course, as you go along, you always find areas where you can improve and make things better. And I've kind of compiled those together, and I'm going to deploy those for the next season. But in order to do so, we're going to take a little bit of a break so I can get that all refreshed. And then we will start our recording process and get back very soon. With that being said, let's talk about this episode. Okay? In this episode, we're going to talk about an argument that is absolutely as old as Star Trek. And is whether or not Starfleet is a military organization or not.
Yes.
Some would say yes. Some would say no. So
Some would say maybe.
Let's see what the lore tells us, and we'll see where we land. Ah.
Well, yeah.
I did think of a line from Hamilton to sing there.
Yep.
But almost did.
We need to like come up with our own version of what's the song that the King sings? You'll be back, or
It does 3 actually.
well, okay. What's the one that most people are familiar with?
You'll Be Back is the first one, and it's the longest one.
Oh, of course, yes. So, anyways, so let's
I know all 3.
let's dive in here,
Of course you do.
and let's look at the arguments for Starfleet being a military organization.
Should we take a quick poll and see where everybody lands?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and let's do that round table on that. So we'll say Evil Patrick. And going forward, anytime Patrick Goodman
Do
is
we
with
just
us,
clockwise?
yeah, clockwise, we're going to refer to Patrick Murray as Evil Patrick because we all know he's evil.
Yes. And yes, they are. There's the answer.
Okay, Patrick Goodman, or evil in training, Patrick.
Evil in training, Patrick. Okay.
This is not at all confusing.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah, I think they are.
Okay, and Mike.
Yeah, I mean, and Evil Patrick in training and I both were in the military, and you know what? When I look at it, I don't think there's any doubt at all. It is definitely a military organization.
And I am going to agree with you guys because, quite frankly, and at least for me, until the day I die, I will fight for there ever being Starfleet Marines.
Okay, so we all agree. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks for joining. It was great.
That was quick and easy. I liked it.
Yep.
That's Grucken fate.
Until next time, rock out with your back out. Let's get out of here.
Somewhere among our half dozen listeners, somebody's head just exploded, though.
Yeah, probably.
But I mean,
what? That everybody agreed on something, or
no, that we think it's military.
Oh, well.
I mean, I'll start. So one of the things to me when I look at it, it's very clear they have a hierarchy. There's a military hierarchy structure in place, right? They have chain of command. There are episodes called Chain of Command, for God's sake. They use ranks that pretty much what's in the Navy: admiral, captain, lieutenant. There are Marines. Thank you, Star Trek VI, Colonel West, right? So we have Marines.
Mm-hmm.
They have a military academy, right, for officers. You go to school and you graduate as an officer. And there's other lore that says there's training facilities for enlisted to go to, just like the military has. All Starfleet personnel have to go to school to do their jobs. Even, like doctors or lawyers or something like that, they still have to go to the academy, right? They have general orders that they follow. And those get referenced in various aspects of the show. They have court martials if you get into misconduct, like in the TOS episode, Court Martial. And they swear an oath, right? Like Patrick, when you were in the Air Force, you probably did the same oath I did. Now, I swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Indeed.
All these things to me they just say military, right? And there are quotes for that. I mean, Kirk says in Court Martial, this is a court of space law, not a tribunal of Starfleet Command. He's making the very clear distinction of a court case and a tribunal that Starfleet would hold. And DS9, one of my favorite episodes, Rocks and Shoals, Cisco, they're talking about what to do. And somebody says, I vote that we surrender. And he says, this is not a democracy. If it comes to a choice between them or us, there is no choice. So all of these things to me just say this is a military structure.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many different points that you've just brought up there. I mean, could be a clear as day that they, excuse me, that this is a military organization. Simply, I mean, even if you took like all but one of those points off the table, I think it would still point towards a military organization simply because they have a chain of command.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
right.
you could make the argument that in civilian naval in civilian ships, the owner or the head of a ship is known as the captain, but I mean there is no other rank structure as far as when it comes down to a civilian vessel. I mean, people have different roles or different positions, first mate or whatever. But in this case, the roles that people play, the ranks that they attain, even so far as referring to their particular position or rank as a commission, still to me screams out military. military and military and military. Military doesn't necessarily have to mean a warlike organization. I mean, they are.
True.
I mean, they are obviously prepared for war. They have, and as you in your second point, they say that they have combat readiness and warfare. I mean, our military today is not specifically designed to be traipsing off to war. I mean, that's not our goal. Our goal is not to be in an endless war. Our goal is to maintain the peace outside times of war. So just because, just because they are focusing on exploration and more scientific pursuits does not mean they are not the military. I think the only I mean, and I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, and I could, I'll hold back a little bit. But there was a comment that David Marcus made in Star Trek II about how the scientists are always kind of,
Pawns of the military.
Pawns of the military.
Well, but we know that Regular One is not a Starfleet installation. We know it's a Federation science outpost. Okay, you can make the argument that the Federation is not a military organization, but 100% I think Starfleet is.
Yeah,
they just have to be the military arm of the Federation.
And that does not preclude them also being the primary exploratory arm.
Sure,
but they are charged with two different things. They are charged with exploration. I mean, that's their entire classes of ships called explorers. That they're also charged with the defense of the Federation. And that, if that's not a military function, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Lars makes a good point that you're not supposed to be going off to war all the time. You're training and you're prepared so that you don't have to. Right, you have a military that discourages that sort of thing, and it's the only job that I can think of. I mean, I don't know about you, Patrick, but certainly when I was in the military, it was in tank crew armor. I didn't want to go off and actually do my job. I was happy to train for it, but I didn't want to have to go and get into a no shit shootout.
Yeah, I was in communications and computer operations. I didn't want to do the wartime application of my job. I was perfectly happy with sending supply requisitions and things like that. I didn't want to send casualty reports.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be the one to have to send the messages, hey, your son is dead.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just because we train for combat doesn't mean we want to participate in it. I mean, I know that it does not get a lot of appreciation here, but there was the first couple of episodes of Discovery covered that. We are scientists.
And then
when Burnham starts that war, they're scientists. They don't know what the hell they're doing because that's not their job. That's not what they perceive as their job. I mean, which is one of the things that leads to a lot more militaristic action in the original series, because Gene Roddenberry was a World War II veteran.
Yes.
And at least in the original series, I mean, it was explicitly a military organization.
Yeah,
they're very explicit about it. They're very explicit about the captain of the ship being in charge. They were very, they are very into combat drills. I can't tell you the number of times during the first season that they're doing combat drills. But that's not because they wanted to go off and fight a war, but they had to be ready in case the Klingons came along and said, we like this planet. We know it's yours, but we're taking it anyway.
And even in the quote that I left in the cold open, where Picard says we're not a military organization. This isn't an episode specifically where he's going off against Riker, and they're actually doing
War
a little bit of
games.
war game stuff.
Yeah.
And then the Ferengi show up and try to be menacing, and we all laugh
Of course.
because
Yeah.
at least they didn't break out the whips.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Patrick Goodman, yeah, you brought up a good point that I hadn't thought about, but you're right. In the first season of the original show, this only happened on screen one time, but in the episode Balance of Terror, you actually have basically what are gun crews.
Yeah.
But there is a phaser room, and there are people that's their job is to actually fire the phasers. They're being told by the bridge to do it. That
Phaser control.
that screams that's a military rank. That's
Yeah.
or military rate. That's a job
Yeah,
that
that's,
you know. So, yeah.
Phaser control operator, second class. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and okay, so I mean, I think it's pretty clear that they basically it doesn't pass the smell test when you try to argue that it's not. The other thing is that it's very clear that they treat everything like sort of times going forward from the original series through TNG and I always refer to it as the TNG timeline, which includes TNG, DS9, Voyager, and even to some degree Lower Decks and whatnot, and the Picard timeline. When you go back now, I mean, there could be an argument made against it in when you go back to look at like Enterprise. I think initially Starfleet was not designed to be a primarily military organization. They had certain things to protect the ships because they knew when it was time to get out there and start exploring that they could and would run into trouble.
Yeah.
So they had things like polarizing the hull plating to help protect them. They had missiles so that they could have at least some form of protection, because it just going out there without any form of protection is just bad bad decisions. It is not best practices. But as unfortunately they had the storyline, the
Xindi War.
the Xindi timeline, or sorry, the Xindi events of season 3, that does actually show how they pivot to a more militaristic, I guess, format as they go forward, because then they started coming up with things like Red Alert, which they called, I think, Readiness Alert or something like that.
Yeah.
Tactical alert.
Tactical Alert. Thank you.
Alert. Yeah.
And they introduced what they called photonic torpedoes, which were designed to be much, something with much more powerful, a much more powerful kick.
And
so
cooler.
Yeah, of course, and of course it helps to continue to bridge that gap between the pre-Kirk timeline and what we had already established later on. But still, I mean, that would be the only time that it was ever really apparent that they tried not to be one.
Yeah, I mean, there's an episode, I believe it's in the Xindi arc of the show where Degra is on the Enterprise and they're looking at the scans of the spheres, and he says these are very detailed for a military ship, and Archer says Enterprise was designed to be a ship of exploration, and Degra as well. If it's successful, it will be again. So yeah, they tried to be, but I mean, as early as the first season, they're like, this ain't going to work.
Oh, and to be fair, one of the reasons Starfleet in the 22nd century tried so hard not to be a military was they were literally a generation and a half from a nuclear Armageddon scale world war.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like we can, they're very laudable goal. We can do better. We can absolutely do better. And then they find out that the rest of the galaxy doesn't necessarily want to play along.
Yeah.
They tried,
Going
and
on
I mean,
wars,
I think
wars,
they're still clearly
Marine
still
war.
trying in the next generation. We
Yeah.
would much rather be explorers
Borg. Yeah.
than
It's-
soldiers.
Yeah, and
Right.
to me, Next Generation is where I think you get hit with the most of the language that, oh, we're not military. You know, Picard says lines
Yeah.
like that all the time.
Yeah, this is where Roddenberry's philosophy really came in. In the original series, obviously, it was get a show on, have your morality plays, but they still did a lot of military stuff. But yeah, Gene Roddenberry was emphatic. Starfleet was not a military organization, but something akin to the Coast Guard, which is military organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's considered one of our armed forces, is it not?
Yeah,
It is. The Coast Guard is the only one that's not under Department of Defense. It's under actually Homeland Security now. It used to be under Treasury Department, but you know, my daughter was in the Coast Guard. The ships have guns. They absolutely train to use them, and much to the embarrassment of the Army and the Marines, I don't remember what year this was. The sniper competition, the inter-service sniper competition, Coast Guard won it. And you know, the Marines that were on that detail had a bad time when they got back home.
I think everybody probably had a bad time.
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
The Army getting beat by the Marines is like, it was the Marines. You're
Get beat by the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Damn. But
It-
yeah,
didn't you other regular service people just make fun of the Coast Guard, sort of?
oh yeah,
Defending our land with mops
on.
in their hands.
yeah. The Navy used to call them puddle pirates.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when I was in the air, you know, defending our land with mops in their hands.
That's it.
Because that's what the image was. Even then, it wasn't accurate.
Yeah,
but you know,
Yeah, I mean, having a kid in the Coast Guard really opened my eyes to exactly what the Coast Guard's all about. Her boot camp was way worse than mine, and I went, you know, friggin' 30 something years ago during a war, and it was not as bad as what she had to deal with in the Coast Guard.
there you
So-
go.
You know,
But yeah,
I mean,
so yeah.
when one of your primary duties is interdictions with drug smugglers
Mhm.
and piracy, which, you know, a lot of people, you know, it does not mean they're flying a black flag and walking around with an eye patch. Piracy is a very real,
Mhm. It is.
and to that extent, you know, Roddenberry was right. Starfleet is the Coast Guard because you're dealing with the Orions and the
Well, yeah, I mean, they do
and
focus.
frickin'
Blue
Noskins
Orions.
and-
They do disrupt, you know, illegal activities in interstellar space, but I still think that they are primarily a military organization simply by their makeup. Just because, you know, one of the points that we've got here is that, you know, things like the Federation has no official standing army, and that's, you know, Starfleet is a defense force, not a military one. Well, I mean, how can you genuinely discount a defense force from being a military one, even if it was just paramilitary? The idea is that they train their officers to be ready for war. It doesn't. I mean, they do train them in things like ethics and science and diplomacy and exploration and all manner of intellectual pursuits. But at the same time, they do prepare them to be ready for war. Because if they didn't, you know, Starfleet or the Federation wouldn't have lasted very long. Because somebody would have come in and it would have just absolutely walked all over them.
Klingons, Romulans.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Born.
even though it's never been officially established in canon, it has been mentioned a number of times that during the Earth Romulan War, that the Romulans actually got to Earth and nuked Earth, and it's because Starfleet just didn't have the resources to be able to effectively defend. and it was after that there was a fundamental shift in things. And now again, I guess I understand I accept that it's not considered canon, but it does underscore the point. You can teach your service members to be more than just killing machines, but still be a military organization. Our own here in the United States, our own military organizations. I'm sure that you guys were taught more things than just how to go pew pew.
A lot more things.
Not much more than that, honestly. There's a
Well,
reason they call us DATs, dumbass tankers.
Basic is one thing, but I mean, I was in communications and computer operations, but even then, I was qualified.
Right, you had to be. You had to go through basic combat training to just like every other service person had to do.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as it is. At the end of the day, their primary role is to be able to defend the Federation. While they're not doing that, there's plenty of other things they can do, especially since, God knows how much one of these ships actually costs, right? You can't have it just sitting around. So, they do go and they explore, and that's why you see people on the ship that they are scientists or historians or even legal experts, whatever. But you get some of that in the military now. I mean, when I was on peacekeeping duty, our tanks never left the base. We ran around in Humvees. We did everything from presence patrols to setting up polling sites for the election that was coming up that year, visiting schools and doing anti-mine training with little kids. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff that we did that had nothing to do with our real job. So I kind of see it the same way here. It's a resource. You have the ship, you have this crew. You don't need them fighting anybody right now. Go off and explore.
Yeah.
And while the primary mission may be exploration, you've got that they can get into a fight at any time and they're ready to go. That's pretty much what a military organization is.
True. I agree. Let's pivot towards another possibility, and that being that is it truly military, or is it simply military to us because of how we define what a military is in our 21st century mindset? I mean, we understand that people who wear the uniform are in the military. I mean, it's probably one of the most common cliche references you make to somebody who is serving in the armed forces. You don't often hear people say, "Oh, my brother is in the armed forces." I mean, you might, but not as often as my brother or sister or whatever is in the military. Or I mean, other than saying, my dad was in the Air Force. My mom was in the Navy. My dad went off to Vietnam as part of the Air Force. Yada yada yada. But at the same time, you still hear this whole thing about it being I know somebody in the military. I think that's because that's how we know. That's how we know that that's how these people are defined. And I think in Star Trek, it's the same thing. I think it's a little bit more of a blended sort of identity, insofar as that you have people who are not necessarily prepared for war, like people who are dedicated scientists, people who are doctors, people who do things, who are engineers that are not tilted towards building starships for war or weapons for war. But at the same time, they work hand in hand. I think that just because they work together, it doesn't necessarily mean that the people who do serve in those types of positions are not military. I think it's worth noting that there is a definable military part of Starfleet. It's just that they've allowed people who don't necessarily do that as a primary role to be part of it as well. So it kind of, like I said, makes a bit of a blended identity.
Well, you even have that in modern military. Like if you go on a large ship, say an aircraft carrier. Okay, you have pilots, you have command crew, you have people who potentially arming the planes, people who work on the planes. All those can be considered military. There's also people who do laundry. There's people who cook. There's people who do morale and services. There's all kinds of stuff on there that has nothing to do with actual military. They just happen to be serving on a ship.
They're not necessarily combatants. They're combatant roles and there are non-combatant roles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, mine was technically a non-combatant role, but if it came down to it, they were perfectly happy to send me out there.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same thing here, but instead of seeing cooks and laundry, because they have the technology to just handle those things instantly with replicators. You don't need that. But you could have scientists, you could have geologists, you could have historians. But I guarantee you, even though we never saw it on screen, I guarantee you, when you go to Red Alert, every single one of those people had a battle station to go to, even if it was just a stretcher bearer or auxiliary damage control. You went somewhere. You didn't say, "Oh, we're under attack. Well, I'm going to sit here with my microscope."
Yeah.
You had something you were supposed to do.
That's true. For the kind of the last part of this discussion, I wanted to share a few examples of how this blended identity has been demonstrated in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Kirk laments that people can be very frightened of change, and in that he's suggesting that a shift from a military mindset to a diplomatic one is difficult, but it is ultimately necessary.
Which is kind of what our military can do, is they stand down and they're ready to act if needed. They go through war games, things like that, but for the most part, not out actively in combat situations.
Right. They are focusing their attention towards the exploration and scientific side of things, but
that's what Starfleet primarily wants to do.
Yeah, but they're ready to clean somebody's chronometers, so to speak, when the time comes.
Yeah.
In Enterprise, I mean, again, we talked about this. It portrays Starfleet as a proto-organization that does assume the defensive capabilities. I mean, even the Makos themselves are referred to as soldiers. So, I mean, they're right there, and they're serving on what is, a less military vessel, but at the same time still fitting into that mindset.
And let's not forget that when they were first assigned to Enterprise, Archer fought it.
Yep. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He was full bore on, we are an exploratory service, and it took 7 million people dying in Florida from the Xindi test weapon.
Not Florida Man.
To we'll get to Florida Man later, I'm sure. But it took that. It took that scale of something to convince Archer. I mean, Tucker was, of course, his sister died there.
Right.
So it was war. Let's go.
He was polarized.
Tucker was ready. Archer was still like, we're, until they actually got into the Delphic Expanse and started dealing with what was going down there more and more and more and more.
Yeah, exactly. And,
he fought it. And, maybe, we were talking earlier, maybe paramilitary is a better description, but because Archer's idealism, finally gave way to realism.
It's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to go punch somebody.
Sometimes you got to go hit somebody. And
well, I mean, you think about this, okay? Think about how they approach things in Star Trek Discovery. That entire first season was all about war with the Klingons, and I mean, it was like they leaned into it. They leaned into, this is a warship. We are We are in a time of war. We are acting like warriors. There is no, that we're not out here trying to find out how the universe ticks right now. We're trying to protect ourselves from extinction and annihilation. And it was
Although you can contrast that with the first two episodes of the season versus the rest of the season, because the first two episodes are very much about we're out here exploring, and we get Captain Georgiou in her awesomeness, and Michael Burnham is a good first officer, and all that, and then shit hits the fan, and then we cut back, and we're at war, and it's war, war, war,
Yeah.
and that's kind of one of the themes of that first season is how Starfleet is damaged by being constantly at war.
Yeah, well, you get that in Deep Space Nine as well. That starts out with, Cisco is going to rebuild this station and help build a dialogue and relationship with the Bajorans so that they can join Starfleet. That's his thing, or join the Federation. I'm sorry, that's his thing. That's what he's there for. 2 seasons later, it's war with the Dominion, and that's the overarching thing for the entire rest of the show. Is they're at war, and they use that term a lot, that they are at war.
Yeah, although they slow burn that for the first few seasons, it just builds and builds, and then finally, the last couple seasons, they're full in it, and it's nothing but war almost the entire time.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, does anybody else have any further comments on whether or not you think Starfleet is a military organization or not?
I would say one last thing. I think we could say that Starfleet's primary mission, if you define mission as the thing you do the most, would be exploration. Their primary purpose is defense. And you want to see that? Look at like the big battle Wharf 359, or in oh God, I'm having a senior moment. What's the movie where they go back in time?
First Contact.
First Contact. God, what's wrong with me?
Star Trek 4.
Not that one.
They
When-
killed whales.
Wrong time travel movie.
Wrong one.
Oops, they went there and nuked the whales. Whoops.
Yeah.
Damn it.
When the Borg were detected, everybody that was in range came to help fight. It wasn't, oh no, you're busy exploring. That's more important. It was, no, drop your shit and get in here and help us fight the Borg. That's their primary purpose. They just don't have to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be my position.
Which is much like our modern military. I mean, yes, there are conflicts all over the world. However, when there is no major active war that we're involved in, it is peacekeeping.
Yeah.
So
Or just being there so that the peace survives. Basically, the gunboat diplomacy we saw a lot in the original series.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, military does not mean, primarily an offensive force. You can be military and still be explorers, as like Mike was saying. Your mission changes.
Sure.
Yep.
absolutely. Well, now that we've shared our thoughts on this debate, let us know what you think. Do we get it right? Or, as usual, is there more to discuss? Thank you very much for being here on Treknicity, where we do the deep dive on all things in the Star Trek multiverse. I'm your host, Lars DeSenza, and with me are my co-hosts, Mike Raper and Patrick Murray, along with our special guest host, Patrick Goodman.
Hey, we didn't need this. We didn't need this screen this episode. Holy
Amazing.
First time we made it to
Well,
the season finale.
What the hell?
Holy,
It's our
Kirk and
season.
an alien. Hey.
Yes, absolutely. We will be back for a 9th season. We're gonna take a little break, and we're going to prep some stuff to refresh the show, and to build up a little bit of a reserve so that we're not doing this every 2 weeks, and getting episodes and being able to drop in things so we can take things like holidays and vacations and things of that nature. Sorry, can't speak today. So, on that note, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Treknicity.com, as well as visiting all of our socials listed here. And find us on your favorite podcast service such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and of course, Amazon Music. If you have any have ideas for future episode subjects, please feel free to email us at show@treknicity.com or DM us on any of our social accounts or hop on the Discord server, which the link is in the description for this video.
Yes.
As always, here on Treknicity, rock out, which is Spock out. And we will see you next season.